The village of UMUOKWE woke each morning before the sun, not because it was eager for the day, but because hunger did not allow sleep to linger. Roosters crowed into the dark. Mortars thudded softly as women pounded last measures of dried cassava. Smoke rose in thin, tired columns from mud kitchens built by hands that had long stopped dreaming of rest. At the far edge of the village, where the red earth began to thin into bush and thorn, stood a hut that leaned slightly to the left, as if exhausted from standing too long. That hut belonged to UMUOKWE. She was a widow, not the loud kind that wailed endlessly or wore grief like a garment to be admired. Hers was the quiet type, the kind grief hollowed out and filled with patience instead of bitterness. Her husband, Obinna, had died 3 rainy seasons earlier. No sickness, no warning. A falling palm tree, cracked by wind and rot, had ended him in one careless moment. The village had buried him quickly. Men spoke of fate. Women shook their heads and whispered, "Life is cruel to those who already have little." After the mourning ended, so did the help. What remained was UMUOKWE, a thin widow of 32, and her daughter Amara, 8 years old, with eyes too large for her small face, eyes that watched the world as if it might disappear if she blinked too long. That morning, UMUOKWE woke before Amara. She sat on the edge of the raffia mat, tying her wrapper tightly, fingers stiff from the night cold. Her joints ached, not from age, but from years of carrying burdens meant for 2 people. Outside, the sky was still gray, undecided about becoming morning. UMUOKWE stared at the corner where Obinna's machete used to lean. Empty, sold long ago for food. She sighed, a sound so soft it barely existed, then rose and stepped outside. Firewood was almost gone. Without firewood, there would be no heat, no food, no small comfort against the long day. The forest would have to give again. When Amara woke, she found her mother plaiting her hair. "Mama," the child murmured, voice thick with sleep. "Are we going to the stream today?" UMUOKWE forced a smile. "No, my moon, we're going to the forest." Amara stiffened. The forest was not a place children liked. It was old, too quiet, too full of stories. "But Mama," she whispered, "Auntie Ifunanya said the forest doesn't like widows." UMUOKWE's hands paused, then resumed braiding. "The forest does not choose who it feeds," she said calmly, "only who respects it." Amara nodded, though fear sat behind her eyes. By the time the sun lifted itself fully into the sky, mother and daughter were walking along the narrow path that led away from UMUOKWE, baskets balanced carefully on their heads. Birds scattered at their steps. Grass bent under their feet. The deeper they walked, the more the forest closed around them, trees pressing together like elders sharing secrets. Amara clutched her mother's wrapper. "Mama, do you hear that?" UMUOKWE listened. Only wind. Only leaves. "Yes," she said, "the forest is breathing." They had gone far, farther than usual. The nearer trees had already been stripped by other villagers. Poverty had pushed everyone deeper, each year inching closer to places elders warned against. UMUOKWE knew the stories. She had heard them as a girl sitting by moonlight fires, stories of the great Pithôn of UMUOKWE. Not an ordinary snake, a creature older than memory. Some said it was a god's punishment. Others said it was the spirit of an ancient warrior bound to scales instead of bones. It lived where the trees grew thickest, where even birds avoided landing. She had never believed fully. Hunger makes courage out of disbelief. They reached a clearing where fallen branches lay scattered like discarded bones. Relief washed through her. "We'll gather quickly," UMUOKWE said, "then we go home." Amara nodded and crouched beside her mother, carefully lifting smaller sticks. For a moment, just a moment, peace existed. Then the ground shifted. Not a tremble. A movement. The birds exploded into the air, screaming. Amara froze. "Mama, the bushes parted slowly. Too slowly." Something vast slid forward, coils thick as tree trunks, scales dark and dull like wet stone. The Pithôn emerged. Its body seemed endless, coiling upon itself, filling the clearing with a presence that crushed the air from the lungs. Its eyes were ancient, unblinking, knowing. Amara screamed. UMUOKWE shoved her behind her instantly. "Run," she shouted. "Run, and don't look back." But fear glued Amara's feet to the earth. The Pithôn lifted part of its body, towering as that shadow swallowing mother and child. UMUOKWE grabbed a thick branch from the ground, hands shaking, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would tear free. She stepped forward, not because she believed she could win, but because mothers do not calculate survival when their children stand behind them. The python struck. The air cracked. Nwanibuife swung wildly, the branch glancing off hardened scales. Useless as a whisper, she screamed. Not in fear, but in fury. "Take me!" she cried. "Not my child!" The forest seemed to hold its breath. The python coiled tighter. Amara sobbed, covering her eyes. And then something else moved. Not leaves, not wind. The air rippled as if disturbed by an unseen force. The python recoiled suddenly, hissing, its massive head jerking to the side as though struck by an invisible blow. Nwanibuife stared. Another udart, soundless, powerful. The python shrieked, a terrible sound that made the trees tremble. Nothing could be seen. Yet something was fighting it. An unseen presence. A force that moved like a warrior without a body. The forest darkened, and the battle had only begun. The python did not flee. It retreated, slowly, wounded pride burning in its ancient eyes. Its massive coils scraped against tree trunks, flattening shrubs, shaking the earth as it slid backward into the shadows. Each movement was deliberate, calculated, like a king withdrawing from a battlefield he intended to return to. The clearing fell silent, too silent. Nwanibuife stood frozen, chest heaving, the broken branch dangling uselessly from her hand. Her legs trembled so violently she thought they might fold beneath her. Amara was still screaming. "Mama! Mama!" the child cried, her small hands clutching her ears as though sound itself might harm her. Nwanibuife turned and fell to her knees, pulling Amara into her arms. "Shh!" she whispered, rocking her daughter fiercely, desperately, as if her own body could shield the child from memory. "It's gone. It's gone." But even as she spoke, she knew better. Creatures like that did not leave. They waited. The air around them still felt disturbed, charged, like the aftermath of lightning. Leaves trembled, though there was no wind. Shadows shifted where no bodies stood. Nwanibuife slowly lifted her head. "Who?" she whispered. Her voice sounded small in the forest. There was no answer. Yet she felt it. Someone standing close, not threatening, protective. The presence lingered for a few heartbeats more, then faded, like mist touched by morning sun. Only then did Nwanibuife realize she was crying. Not loudly. Tears slid silently down her face, dripping onto Amara's hair. She had faced death. She had survived. But the weight of how close she had come to losing her only child cracked something open inside her. "Amara," she said hoarsely, pulling back to look at her daughter. "Can you stand?" The child nodded weakly. They did not gather firewood. They did not look back. They ran. The village of UMUOKWE sensed disaster before it arrived. Dogs began barking as mother and daughter stumbled into the open space between huts. Women paused mid-conversation. Children stopped playing. Nwanibuife's wrapper was torn. Her feet were bleeding. Amara's face was ash-white, eyes glassy with shock. "What happened?" someone shouted. "Forest spirit," another woman cried, crossing herself instinctively. Nwanibuife collapsed near the village well. "The python," she whispered. "It's awake." That word, awake, sent a ripple of fear through the gathered villagers. Old men leaned on their staffs. Young men exchanged uncertain glances. The great python was not something spoken of lightly. It belonged to stories, warnings, sacrifices long abandoned. They carried Nwanibuife and Amara into her hut. That night no drums were played, no laughter drifted between fires. UMUOKWE closed itself inward, doors barred, prayers whispered into darkness. Amara did not sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw scales, felt the ground shake, heard the hiss that sounded like hatred breathing. She clutched her mother's arm until her fingers ached. "Mama," she whispered, "it was going to eat us." Nwanibuife swallowed hard. "Yes," she said honestly. Amara hesitated, but something hit it, something we couldn't see. Nwanibuife stared into the dark. "I know." Silence stretched between them. Then Amara asked the question that had been burning inside her. "Mama, was it Daddy?" Nwanibuife's breath caught. Obinna, her husband. Dead and buried. She had not thought of him that way. Not as a protector beyond the grave. "I don't know, my moon," she whispered. "But if it was a spirit, it was not an angry one." Outside, the wind brushed past the hut. For a moment, just a moment, Nwanibuife thought she heard footsteps that did not touch the ground. The elders met at dawn. They gathered beneath the ancient iroko tree, its roots thick and twisted like frozen serpents. The oldest among them, Elder Okori, leaned forward, eyes sharp despite his years. "The python has been disturbed," he said gravely. "Hunger has driven us too far." A younger man scoffed nervously. "It's just a snake. A big one." Elder Okori's staff struck the ground. Snakes do not defend sacred land, he snapped, and they do not retreat from unseen blows. A murmur rippled through the gathering. What unseen blows? Someone asked. The widow survived, Okori said. That alone is proof. The villagers fell quiet. Everyone knew the unspoken rule. The forest takes, it does not spare. Except, unless, Okori continued slowly, something older has chosen to intervene. What thing? A woman whispered. The elder's voice dropped. A guardian spirit. Fear and awe tangled together like vines. Then why now? Someone demanded. Why protect her? No one answered. That afternoon, Nwanyibwife felt the presence again. She was alone, pounding dried cassava leaves outside her hut when the air cooled suddenly. Her skin prickled. She did not look around. She did not scream. She spoke softly. Thank you, she said. The pounding stopped. The air shifted. Then, a voice. Not loud. Not clear. More like thought brushing against thought. You fought. Nwanyibwife's hands trembled. For my child, she whispered. That is why. Her heart thundered. Who are you? Silence stretched so long she thought she had imagined everything. Then, I am bound to the forest, but not to its cruelty. Her knees buckled and she sank onto the ground. You saved us. Once the voice replied, but the python will return. Terror surged anew. What do you want from me? She asked, tears streaming freely now, a pause. Then the truth, heavy as destiny. To finish what began long before you were born. The presence faded, leaving behind fear and purpose. That night, far from the village, deep in the forbidden heart of the forest, the python coiled around an ancient stone marked with symbols no living villager could read. Its body bore invisible wounds. Its rage burned hotter than pain. The forest had chosen sides, and blood, human or spirit, would soon answer for it. The forest remembered everything. It remembered the first foot that ever crushed its soil. It remembered blood spilled before language had names for guilt. It remembered promises broken by men who swore to gods they later forgot, and it remembered him. Long before Nwanyibwife was born, before UMUOKWE had a name, before huts dotted the red earth, there lived a warrior called Eziosha. He was not a king, but kings feared him. Eziosha was forged in war and tempered by loss. He had stood between raiding clans and helpless villages, between fire and flesh. His arms were thick with scars, each one earned, never hidden. Yet what defined him most was not his strength. It was the vow he made beneath the forest moon, a vow that chained his spirit long after his bones turned to dust. Eziosha had a wife once. Her name was Nkiru. She laughed like running water and believed the forest listened when people spoke kindly to it. When she walked, children followed her without fear. When she sang, even wounded men forgot pain. She died carrying their first child. Not by sickness, not by blade, by the great python. In those days, the python was worshipped openly. It was fed with goats, with yams, with blood when the rains failed. The elders said it was the forest's will made flesh. Nkiru had gone to the stream alone. She never returned. When Eziosha found what remained of her, the forest did not answer his screams. Grief broke something sacred inside him. He went to the elders. They promised protection, he said, eyes hollow. You fed it my wife. The elders bowed their heads. The forest chooses, they replied. That night, Eziosha did something no man had dared. He went alone into the deepest heart of the forest and called upon every spirit that would listen. He offered his life, his blood, his soul, but not his silence. If the forest demands balance, he shouted into the dark, then let my existence be the blade that restores it. The spirits answered, not kindly, not cruelly. They bound him to the forest between life and death, a guardian, a punishment, a reminder. Eziosha died that night, and yet he never left. Nwanyibwife did not know any of this, not yet. All she knew was that the forest had begun to watch her back. In the days following the attack, strange things happened. Firewood appeared near her hut in the mornings, dry, stacked neatly. Her cassava flour lasted longer than it should. Once, when Amara fell ill with fever, a bitter leaf she had never planted grew beside the hut overnight. The village noticed. Whispers followed her steps. She is favored, some said. She is cursed, others countered. A widow should not draw attention, one old woman muttered. Nwanyibwife kept her head down. She did not ask for miracles. She only wanted her daughter safe. But safety had become a fragile thing. Amara changed, not suddenly, but undeniably. She stopped playing with other children. She spoke less. She listened more. Sometimes she stared into empty spaces and tilted her head as if hearing a voice no one else could. One evening, as Nwanibuife stirred a thin pot of soup, Amara spoke softly. "Mama, he stands near the tree at night." Nwanibuife's hand froze. "Who?" "The man who doesn't touch the ground." The spoon slipped from her fingers. Fear crawled up her spine. "Amara," she said carefully. "What man?" The child shrugged. "He's sad, but not angry." Nwanibuife felt the truth settle in her bones. Children see what adults are taught to forget. The next attack did not happen in the forest. It happened in the village. At dusk, when everyone thought themselves safe. The earth trembled as the python emerged from beneath the old iroko tree, the same tree where elders once made offerings. Huts cracked. Chickens scattered. People screamed. It was larger than before, angrier. Its eyes burned with recognition. This was not hunger. This was vengeance. Men threw spears that bounced uselessly off its scales. Women dragged children screaming from its path. Nwanibuife grabbed Amara and ran. But the python followed, straight toward her hut, straight toward the widow who had survived. The forest guardian felt it instantly. Eziocha manifested fully for the first time in decades. Invisible no longer. Not entirely. A shimmering outline, a shape of muscle and rage. Eyes glowing like embers trapped behind death. He charged. The clash shook UMUOKWE to its roots. The python struck with bone-breaking force. The ghost warrior answered with blows that split the air itself. Villagers watched in stunned horror as myth fought myth in their midst. For the first time they understood. The forest was not punishing them. It was collecting debt. Eziocha could fight, but he could not kill the python outright. Their bond prevented it. Balance demanded sacrifice, and the spirits had chosen the price. Eziocha turned to Nwanibuife, finally visible to her eyes. "Your life crosses mine because you are willing to bleed for another," he said, voice like wind through stone. "But this war will not end without loss." Tears streamed down her face. "Take me," she begged. "Just leave my child." Eziocha shook his head. "The forest has already taken too much from mothers." Then he spoke the truth she feared. The python can only be destroyed by a living hand, guided by the dead. Silence swallowed her scream. The morning after the battle, UMUOKWE smelled of fear. Not smoke. Not blood. Fear. It clung to the air like damp cloth, heavy on the skin, impossible to shake off. The python was gone. No coils crushed huts, no hissing echoed through the trees. But the ground where it had risen lay split and scarred, and the villagers stared at it the way one stares at a grave that has not yet been filled. Nwanibuife sat inside her hut, Amara's head resting on her lap. Neither of them had slept. Every time Nwanibuife closed her eyes, she saw the shimmer of that spirit warrior, half man, half memory, standing between her and death. Every time Amara blinked, she saw the python's eyes. "Mama," the girl whispered, voice thin. "Will it come back?" Nwanibuife opened her mouth, then closed it. Because lies were easier, but truth lasted longer. "Yes," she said softly, "but not today." Amara nodded, as if she had already known. Children who survive terror grow older inside. By midday, the elders summoned Nwanibuife. Not with kindness, not with respect, with fear disguised as authority. She walked to the iroko tree with Amara beside her, her back straight, her hands trembling only slightly. Villagers watched from doorways, some crossed themselves, others spat softly into the dirt. Elder Okori did not offer her a seat. "You brought the forest into our homes," he said. Nwanibuife lifted her chin. "I went to fetch firewood." Murmurs rippled. "The python followed you," another elder snapped. "It did not attack the others." "Because I survived," she replied, "and survival angers predators." A dangerous silence fell. Okori narrowed his eyes. "Or because something follows you." Amara squeezed her mother's hand. Nwanibuife felt Eziocha's presence stir faintly behind her, watchful, restrained. "If something protects me," she said evenly, "it is because something tried to kill my child." That silenced them. No one dared argue against a mother's truth, but fear does not need logic, it only needs a target. That night, Eziocha came again. This time he did not linger at the edges. He stood fully formed in the hut, his presence dimming the firelight, his outline sharper than before, as if the world was slowly accepting him. Amara saw him immediately. She did not scream. She bowed her head. "You're the sad man," she said. Eziocha knelt before her, lowering himself so his eyes met hers. "I was," he replied gently. "I am less so now." Nwanibuife's throat tightened. "What happens next?" she asked. The spirit warrior rose. "The python will return stronger," he said, "and the village will offer you to it if fear outweighs gratitude." Her breath caught. "You must learn to fight," he continued, "not with strength, but with will." She laughed bitterly. "I am a widow who struggles to lift water pots." "And yet," he said quietly, "you stood before death with a broken branch." Silence fell. Then the truth, heavy and unavoidable. "If you do nothing," Eziocha said, "Amara will not reach womanhood." Amara's fingers tightened around her mother's wrapper. Nwanyibwife closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her voice no longer trembled. "Teach me." The forest did not train gently. At dawn, Nwanyibwife followed Eziocha beyond the village boundary, deeper than she had ever dared go. The trees pressed close, their shadows long and cold. "You will not fight the python with weapons," he told her. "Steel cannot kill what was born of spirit." "Then how?" she asked. "With memory," he replied, "and with truth." He made her stand barefoot on the forest floor for hours, feeling ants bite, thorns pierce, muscles shake. "Pain teaches presence," he said when she begged for rest. He forced her to confront visions, moments of her life she had buried. Obina's death. The night hunger made her choose between eating and saving seed for planting. The day villagers stopped greeting her by name and began calling her widow. She cried, she screamed, she nearly broke, but she did not run. Amara watched from the edge of the clearing each day, silent, afraid, proud. At night, the child held her mother as Nwanyibwife shook with exhaustion. "Mama," Amara whispered once, "I don't like the forest." Nwanyibwife kissed her forehead. "I don't either," she admitted, "but I love you more than I fear it." The village did not wait long. Fear grows impatient. On the 7th night of training, Nwanyibwife returned to find her hut surrounded, torches burned, faces were hard. Elder Okori stepped forward. "The python's shadow has been seen again," he said, "near the farms." Nwanyibwife said nothing. "The forest demands balance," he continued, "and balance demands offering." Her heart sank. "You want my child," she said. Gasps followed. Okori hesitated, just long enough to damn himself. "She sees spirits," he said. "That is not natural." Amara whimpered. Nwanyibwife moved before thought. She stepped between them. "You will take me first," she said, voice sharp as iron, "or you will take nothing." The crowd murmured, uneasy, shifting. Then it happened. A scream cut through the night, not Amara's. Old Mama Izin collapsed near the edge of the crowd, her body convulsing as dark marks spread across her skin, signs the elders recognized instantly. The python's curse. The village recoiled in horror. Eziocha's voice thundered only in Nwanyibwife's mind. "This is the cost of delay." Mama Izine died before dawn, and UMUOKWE learned a brutal truth. The forest was no longer waiting, a mother's resolve. At sunrise, Nwanyibwife stood before the village again. Her voice did not waver. "The python will be ended," she said. "Not by sacrifice of children, not by cowardice." "And by what?" someone shouted. "By me." Silence. "I will go into the forest," she continued, "and I will not return until it is done." Amara cried out. "Mama, no." Nwanyibwife knelt, gripping her daughter's shoulders. "My moon," she whispered, forehead touching Amara's. "Everything I am walks with you." Tears streamed freely now. "But I will come back," she promised, because mothers do not leave their stories unfinished. Behind her, unseen by the villagers, Eziocha bowed his head. The training was complete. Nwanyibwife left UMUOKWE before the sun fully rose. No drums followed her. No prayers were spoken aloud. Fear had made the village quiet, too quiet for farewells. Amara stood at the edge of the path, barefoot, clutching the small woven charm her mother had made from palm fibers and hope. "Come back," the child whispered, voice breaking, "even if you are not the same." Nwanyibwife knelt and pressed her forehead to her daughter's. "I have not been the same since the day you were born," she said softly, "and that is why I will return." She stood. She did not look back again. The deeper Nwanyibwife walked, the older the forest felt. Trees grew thicker, their roots rising from the ground like the backs of buried beasts. Light thinned, turning green and dim, as though the sun itself feared to follow. Eziocha moved beside her, not walking, not floating, simply being. "You are afraid," he said. "Yes." "Good," he replied. "Fear sharpens attention. It only becomes poison when it rules." She nodded, sweat running down her spine. "Tell me what waits ahead," she asked. "The truth," Eziocha said, "and the lie the village has lived with for generations." They reached a place where the ground dipped suddenly, opening into a vast hollow choked with vines and shadow. At its center lay an ancient stone altar, cracked, stained, forgotten. The air smelled wrong, rot, blood, memory. This is where it began, Ezioka said. The great python had not always been a monster. Long ago, when UMUOKWE was young and desperate, the people sought protection from endless raids and famine. They turned to forest spirits who demanded balance. But humans are impatient. They wanted power without restraint, so they bound a guardian spirit into flesh, forcing it into the shape of a python, feeding it fear and blood, chaining it to hunger so it would never leave. What they made was not a god, Eziocha said bitterly. It was a prison. Nwanyibwife's stomach twisted. So it kills because it was made to? Yes, he replied, and because it remembers what it lost. She understood then. This was not good versus evil. This was damage passed down like inheritance. But it still kills children, she said. Understanding does not excuse that. Eziocha inclined his head. That is why you are here. The ground shifted, slowly. The great python rose from the hollow, coils unfolding with terrible patience. Its body bore old scars, burns, cuts, marks of rituals long abandoned. Its eyes locked onto Nwanyibwife, not with hunger, with recognition. You smell of grief. Its voice slithered into her mind. You smell of defiance. Her knees nearly buckled. Eziocha's presence pressed against her back, steady, grounding. I am here to end this, Nwanyibwife said aloud, voice shaking but unbroken. End? The python hissed softly. There is no end for what men refuse to remember. It lunged. This fight did not explode into chaos. It unfolded like ritual. The python struck, coils snapping, earth splitting beneath its weight. Nwanyibwife dodged, guided by Eziocha's voice. Not commands, but instincts awakened. Now. Wait. Feel. She moved when fear screamed at her to freeze. Eziocha struck where she could not, his blows tearing at the spirit bound inside the beast, not the flesh. The python roared, not in pain, but in rage. You would destroy what keeps them safe? It thundered. Safety built on sacrifice is not safety, Nwanyibwife cried. It is cowardice. The python reared back, wounded truth bleeding through its fury. If I fall, it hissed, the forest will demand another guardian. Eziocha went still. That was the lie. No, he said quietly. It will demand responsibility. The python screamed. Amara's awakening. Miles away, Amara collapsed. The ground beneath UMUOKWE trembled. Birds fled. Dogs howled. Amara screamed as visions flooded her. Rituals, blood, chains of spirit and flesh. She saw her mother standing before death. She saw Eziocha's binding. She saw the choice no one wanted to make. The child rose, eyes glowing faintly. The forest is breaking, she whispered, and for the first time UMUOKWE truly listened to a child. Back in the hollow, the python coiled tighter, its voice dropping. One must take my place, it said, or all of this begins again. Nwanyibwife understood instantly. No, she whispered, not Amara. Eziocha stepped forward. It will be me, he said. The python stilled. You are already bound. Then unbind me by ending it. Eziocha replied. Let the cycle end with someone who chose it. Nwanyibwife turned to him in horror. You will disappear. Yes, he said gently, and the forest will... Yes, he said gently, and the forest will finally rest. Tears streamed down her face. You saved us. And now, he said softly, you will save the future. The python lowered its head. The ritual began. Light exploded, not blinding, but ancient. Chains of spirit cracked. The python screamed, not in rage now, but release. Its massive body crumbled into ash and root and bone, sinking back into the earth that had birthed its prison. Eziocha's form flickered. He looked at Nwanyibwife one last time. Tell your daughter, he said, voice fading, that courage can be inherited, but fear does not have to be. Then he was gone. The forest exhaled. Nwanyibwife collapsed. She did not know how long she lay there. When she finally rose, the hollow was quiet, empty, free. She walked home on shaking. UMUOKWE felt the change before they saw her. The air was lighter. The trees no longer whispered warnings. When Nwanyibwife emerged from the forest, covered in ash and tears, the villagers fell to their knees, not in worship, in shame. Amara ran to her, sobbing. You did it, the child cried. No, Nwanyibwife whispered, holding her tight. We survived it. The war had chosen its champion. The forest did not celebrate. It did not sing or bloom or thunder with approval. It simply rested. For the first time in generations, the trees of UMUOKWE stood without tension in their roots. The birds returned cautiously at first, then boldly. The ground, once tight with old rage, softened beneath bare feet. The war was over. But wars do not end when the fighting stops. They end when people learn to live without the thing they once feared and depended on. Nwanyibwife walked into UMUOKWE at sunset. Not carried, not supported. She walked, Her wrapper was torn, her feet scarred, her eyes rimmed red with exhaustion and loss, but her spine was straight. Amara ran to her, arms wrapping around her waist with a force that almost knocked her over. "Mama," the girl sobbed. "I felt it stop. I felt him leave." Nwanibuife closed her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "he is finally free." The villagers gathered slowly, no torches, no shouting, just faces filled with something new. Shame. Elder Okori stepped forward, his staff shaking in his hands. "We wronged you," he said. The words tasted unfamiliar to the village. "We fed our fear instead of our courage. We called it tradition." Nwanibuife said nothing. She had learned something important in the forest. Forgiveness offered too quickly can become another kind of lie. Okori bowed his head. "The land is yours," he said. "Your hut will be rebuilt. Your child will never hunger." Murmurs of agreement followed. Nwanibuife finally spoke. "I did not fight so my child could be spared by pity," she said calmly. "I fought so no child would ever be offered again." The silence that followed was heavy, but clean. Then a woman stepped forward, then another. One by one, the villagers knelt, not to worship, not to beg, but to acknowledge. The forest had chosen a widow, and the village had almost destroyed her for it. Amara did not stop seeing spirits, but they no longer frightened her. Sometimes she spoke of Ezioka, not as a ghost, but as a memory carried in the wind. "He doesn't hurt anymore," she said once, sitting beneath the Iroko tree. "He's like a story that has been told all the way to the end." Nwanibuife listened carefully. The elders wanted to call Amara blessed. Nwanibuife corrected them. "She is aware," she said, "and awareness is a responsibility." They agreed, because they had learned what happened when responsibility was ignored. Amara began to learn the old songs, not the ones that begged spirits for favor, but the ones that honored balance. She learned when to enter the forest, and when to leave it alone. Rebuilding without blood. UMUOKWE changed, slowly, painfully, deliberately. The Iroko tree was no longer used for sacrifice. Instead, disputes were settled there, publicly, honestly. The forest paths were marked clearly, boundaries respected, children were taught the truth, not myths wrapped in fear, but history wrapped in warning. The great Pithôn became a story told carefully, not glorified, not a god, not a monster, a mistake. 1 year after the battle, like drought came. Crops withered, streams shrank, fear stirred, quietly, dangerously. The old ways whispered again. One night, a group of men came to Nwanibuife's hut, not angry, afraid. "Help us," they said. "You know the forest. You know how to speak to it." Nwanibuife looked at their faces. She saw her past reflected there. "No," she said gently, their shoulders slumped, "but I will teach you how to listen." She took them, not deep into the forest, but to its edge. She showed them how to conserve water, how to share food, how to endure without creating another monster to protect them from themselves. The drought passed. The lessons stayed. Years later, when Amara was nearly grown, she asked a question she had carried since childhood. "Mama," she said, "were you ever afraid that I would hate you for choosing the forest over staying with me?" Nwanibuife smiled sadly. "I was afraid every day." "Why did you still go?" "Because love that refuses to act becomes fear wearing a softer face." Amara nodded. "I think," she said slowly, "that courage runs in families, but it changes shape." Nwanibuife reached for her daughter's hand. "Yes," she said, "and it should." On the anniversary of Eziocha's passing, Nwanibuife walked alone to the forest's edge. She did not call out. She did not ask for signs. She simply stood. The wind brushed her cheek. For a moment, not a voice, not a vision, but a feeling passed through her. Gratitude, release, completion. She bowed her head. Then she turned back toward home. Long after Nwanibuife's hair grayed and her hands slowed, long after Amara became a woman whose eyes still saw more than most, the story of UMUOKWE was told differently, not as a tale of a monster, but as the story of a widow who refused to let fear decide her child's future, and of a forest that finally learned protection without compassion is just another kind of violence. What did you learn from this story of a poor widow? Drop her comment and tell us where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful story. See you next time.